What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron. It's Tuesday morning, which means it's time to talk through our must-add waiver wire targets for Week 14 of the fantasy football season. It is the last regular season week for most leagues. It is time to make a little bit of a playoff push here. We have actually, for what's felt like the first time in weeks, a juicy waiver wire here. So we have a lot of injuries to go through, a lot of players that should be priority adds if you have any remaining fab at this point. You got a couple players that you can definitely unload the clip on. So with all that being said, if you enjoy, make sure down below, subscribe, leave a like. Let's go.
Like this froze, ice cold, ice around my body like I'm frozen. She gon' let me.
Now, I'm going to be honest, it pains me to sport this Jets hat right now. I mean, Tim Boyle just got released. The whole Jets organization's a shit show, but my hair's not looking great today. So we're putting the hat on. This is really the only hat I own that really even fits decently well. I have a massive head and I don't wear hats. But that's not what we came here to talk about. I just wanted to get that out of the way because I don't even like the Jets I like the Jets, of course, but I also hate them. But our first must-add waiver wire target is the man, the myth, the legend, Ezekiel Elliott. Ezekiel Elliott is positioned here in front of us today to be a 2023 league winner, which is insane to even say out of my mouth. The Patriots have been awful this year. Ramondre Stevenson's been good in spurts, but this has just been an absolute dumpster fire. And it almost makes you forget that Ezekiel Elliott had this whole thing where it was like, where was he going to sign after the Cowboys? Was he going to sign back with the Cowboys? He ends up in New England. Late round flyer that none of us have probably really put in a lineup outside of desperation spots. But at this point, he's someone that's going to be a RB2 the rest of the way until Ramondre Stevenson comes back. Now, I want to give a massive shout out. Any of these pictures here you see that say like Ramondre Stevenson injury projected timetable, this is from 4for4 over on their like injury report they do. It's called like the training room. I'm trying to think of who writes it. They used to have somebody else write it. I think it might be Jeff Mueller, but I could be way off. But it's a good article I would recommend checking out. But he says Ramondre Stevenson, high ankle sprain projected timetable week 16, 17. There's no fracture, but he's going to miss several weeks. So that means you're going to get Ezekiel Elliott for week 14, week 15, and then potentially week 16, and potentially week 17, right? This is a team out of contention, tanking, potentially trying to get Caleb Williams or Drake May, which is absolutely terrifying for me as a Jets fan. But there's not really a rush to bring back Ramondre Stevenson. So we might just get Ezekiel Elliott as the lead back for the rest of the season. Ezekiel Elliott in this game versus the Chargers, I think he had like 13 PPR points, so not anything too crazy, but 17 carries, 5 targets, and in an RB landscape that it's pretty ugly, this is a guy that you can start in your RB2 spot literally every week. So we can see here as well, I think I read a stat that he's the only non-Ramondre Stevenson running back to register over like 5 touches for the Patriots this year. After the Ramondre injury, he had 93% of the snaps according to Dave Richards. So Ezekiel Elliott, bell cow until further notice. In really, really deep leagues, I don't mind Ty Montgomery as a stash just in case if Ezekiel Elliott was to get hurt or if Ezekiel Elliott was to suck really bad. Ty Montgomery has always been interesting as like a pass-catching gadget type guy, but probably not much there with Montgomery. Again, Ezekiel Elliott, he's a guy you can definitely unload your clip on. Now, after that, we have Roschon Johnson. Now, he's been kind of out of sight, out of mind with the Bears having a bye this past week. But in our last time that we saw the Bears play, Roschon Johnson was the running game. Now, it was a weird game script. I believe it was a primetime game, but he ends up with 75% of the snaps. Now, here's the important thing to note. Roschon didn't get fed, but he had 12.5 PPR points, his second best game of the year. He had 10 rushes for 35 yards, 5 catches for 40 yards. 15 touches is great. What it really comes down to is Khalil Herbert was coming off of an injury. He now gets a bye. It's going to be much more of an even 50-50 split, but even then, I don't mind Roschon Johnson as like an RB3 type of guy, someone who maybe carve out a bigger role. Khalil Herbert could get hurt again. The big thing to keep your eye on is D'Onta Foreman. If there's 2 running backs in this backfield, Roschon Johnson's like a fringe starter. If there's 3, then it's a complete mess. So just keep an eye on D'Onta Foreman. If D'Onta Foreman doesn't play this week, they have the Detroit Lions. They should be trailing in that game versus the Detroit Lions, and that would set up Roschon Johnson to have a nice little sneaky game here. So if anybody forgot to add Roschon Johnson last week, I like him as an ad. Someone that could have been the number 1 overall ad this week is Tyjae Spears. Now, I still think he's a great ad. First of all, he's only owned in like 30% of ESPN leagues at this point. And we have Derrick Henry banged up. Now, the meme of yesterday, I'd almost say, is that Derrick Henry just pretty much said nah to the concussion protocol. He just pretty much was like, nah, I don't do that. Vrabel clarifies that Derrick Henry is not in the concussion protocol. That puts him on track to play this week. He took a really big hit. Now, Derrick Henry is obviously a really big guy. He's one of the toughest dudes in the NFL, one of the scariest guys in the NFL, but he's not above concussions. Now, he's not in the protocol, but I would keep your eye out for Derrick Henry's practice reports this week. If he's limited or if he sits out of practice, then maybe there's something going on there. If not, and he's just completely good to go, then he's completely good to go. But regardless, this stretch of games for the Titans is really juicy. They have the Texans twice between now and the fantasy championship round in week 17. So if anything was to ever happen to Derrick Henry, Tyjae Spears becomes a must start, which means he's a must stash for now. So I would definitely grab him. Again, there's upside that Derrick Henry is more injured than leading on this week, and if not, he's an aging running back, end of the season. He could get banged up or tweak an ankle or something like that, and in that, you want to be on top of Tyjae Spears before the rest of your league gets there. Now, after that, we have Kenneth Gainwell, which is an interesting one here. I love DeAndre Swift, but he has been absolutely brutal recently. DeAndre Swift has not hit over 15 PPR points since week 7 at this point. He has been ineffective rushing the ball. They just lost a game, and DeAndre Swift got hurt in this game. And you have a tweet from Dr. Jesse Morris here where DeAndre Swift heads into the medical tent during the game. He said there have been no updates regarding DeAndre Swift out of this tweet when he went into the locker room. He only had a 42% snap share, less than Gainwell. He entered the game dealing with an ankle injury. We should have some updates tomorrow with the first practice of the week. So we'll kind of see what happens in terms of practice reports, but DeAndre Swift's status for this Sunday or whenever they play, definitely sort of up in the air here versus the Cowboys. I believe they're playing the Cowboys. And that opens some things up for Kenneth Gainwell. He had a 54% snap share, his highest mark he's had since week 1. When remember, DeAndre Swift was barely even a factor in week 1, and Gainwell was the main guy. They could go back to that sort of split there with Swift not being super effective and Gainwell having a lot of trust in that building. So somebody that you can definitely start in desperation spots. And if Swift was to go down or not play this week, then Gainwell someone you can definitely almost becomes not a must start, but an easy RB2 this week. I also even think that Rashad Penny is not a terrible stash as well. Now, after that, we have Deejay Dallas as an ad here. This one's interesting. His player picture, by the way, is hilarious. So Zach Charbonnet has a swollen knee. Now, Pete Carroll keeps a really tight ship on his Seahawks where they don't really talk much. They don't really say anything about injuries. But we do know that Zach Charbonnet, from Jesse Morris again, expect an MRI. This is December 1st, and we really haven't got an update since. This is usually due to either a torn meniscus or a torn ligament. Isolated swelling without large injury is possible, but not super common. So this could be one of those injuries I think Kelsey had it in week 1, where there's just so much swelling around his knee that there's not anything long-term as an issue, but you just have to wait for the swelling to go down before you can go back to playing NFL football. So it could be that situation. Could be a situation where he actually has a torn meniscus or a torn ligament. And on top of that, Kenneth Walker has missed the last few weeks with an injury of his own. So there's a chance here that Kenneth Walker's out, that Zach Charbonnet is out, and Deejay Dallas is the next man up. Now, I also like Kenny McIntosh. There's a nice little sneaky stash there as well. But Deejay Dallas will be the next man up. He's been the guy who's been active playing the entire year as pretty much that Travis Homer role they've had in the past. But their hand would be forced here to feature Deejay Dallas as their RB1 in this scenario. Now, again, it's a long shot. I don't know when your waivers run. Probably tonight, so we're not going to get enough info by then. But he is a nice little stash just in case if both the Seahawks running backs can't go this week. Now, switching over to our wide receivers here, we have the Green Bay wide receivers, literally just all of them here, where you can see this is the rookie wide receiver report that we usually talk through on the Top 10 Lessons Learned video. And you can see along the left-hand side, you have Jaden Reed and Dontavion Wicks sandwiching Josh Downs there. Now, pretty much this waiver wire ad player that we're talking through is just all the Packers wide receivers. We have Christian Watson go down, which I'll actually highlight first here, where this is from that 4for4 article. Week 15 to 17, they don't know when he's going to be back. It's a hamstring injury, which linger. They're very annoying, especially for a downfield receiver for Christian Watson. He could be on and off all year, which what that means is with Jordan Love playing out of his mind, we get a good offensive environment and wide receivers who are now going to run more routes. So Romeo Doubs is a great ad. Romeo Doubs, of course, not a rookie, but he's been great. He's been quietly like the wide receiver 35 this year, so a nice little flex piece. And then we also know the upside of rookie wide receiver. So I do love Jaden Reed and Dontavion Wicks. You can see Dontavion Wicks, only 41% of the route, but again, without Watson, that's probably going to go up a little bit. 1.98 yards per route run is great. 19.1% targets per route run is great. 73 PFF grade is great. Wicks is very interesting, but I definitely prioritize Reed over him for sure. Where Jaden Reed, 51% of the routes this week, but that's because he was banged up heading into the game. But 19.9% target per route run, 1.7 yards per route run. So per route, he's a little bit weaker than Wicks, but he's been the one who's preferred on the depth chart, and he's the one who's actually been giving you startable weeks where, yes, Wicks looks better per route, but it's also a much smaller sample than Reed. So if I had to say priority, I would say Reed, then Dobbs, but both like in the same tier break down to Dontavion Wicks there. Now, after our Green Bay wide receivers, we have Noah Brown, local legend. We've talked about him in the past, but he has been banged up for the last few weeks. He comes back this week. Now, he doesn't really do much. He has 2 targets, I think 0 catches versus the Broncos this past week, but sadly, Tank Dell out for the year. So with Tank Dell out for the year, we have a lot of routes opened up, and Noah Brown has been the only guy not named Nico Collins, where like it feels like Robert Woods, John Mechie, Xavier Hutchinson they also haven't really done much in their opportunity. Noah Brown's at least done something. The last 2 games he's played, not including the Denver game, like the 2 games before the injury, he had 20-plus PPR points in both of those weeks. So to me, he's a very easy, flexible option with Tank Dell out, just given how good this passing offense has been. Our 8th must-add wide receiver. Dude, the Christian Kirk injury is crazy. They're saying it's like an abdomen injury. From the video, it looked like he just like smashed his nuts. Like I have no other way to describe what happened to Christian Kirk last night besides his legs just smashing a nut. Is really all I can sort of describe what his injury was last night. Feel bad for him though. Like if that's really gonna keep him out multiple weeks, then like he put a hurting. I mean that's just crazy. But regardless, Zay Jones. He had his first game over 90% of the routes since week 1. He didn't do much with them, but, I mean, it's going to be tough because now Trevor Lawrence is out. So definitely keep that in mind with Zay Jones, but he's going to be running a lot of routes on this team. So he's like a low-end flex moving forward, Zay Jones. Now, after that, we have Elijah Moore. Elijah Moore, man, he links up with Joe Flacco, and he becomes a flex option. At pretty much any game where he's with Joe Flacco, he's like a flex option for me. We now have a 7-game sample of him having 11.8 points per game with Joe Flacco. Outside of that, the 31 other games, 7.7 points per game. So Joe Flacco and Elijah Moore have a connection dating back to their time in New York, and it's carried over to Cleveland, where he had one of his best games of the season last week. Now, you're talking more of like a low-floor Jarvis Landry type of role, where it's just a lot of targets, not much of anything else, but that's still somebody you can definitely flex in deeper leagues. Then our last guy is just a stash running back here. Antonio Gibson, then also Chris Rodriguez I'd add as well. We have Brian Robinson dealing with a hamstring injury. Now, the issue is that Washington has a bye week in week 14. So Brian Robinson most likely gets right after the bye week and heals up and probably is back. But if he's not, we have a game or 2 of Antonio Gibson and Chris Rodriguez. I'd imagine that Antonio Gibson is the main guy, pass catching back, can do it all. But Chris Rodriguez is also a guy that they drafted and they liked. He's more of kind of your between the tackles grinder out of Kentucky. Kind of reminds me of a Benny Snell type of guy where it's not super flashy, it's not sexy, but he is somebody that could certainly get goal line carries and get like 10 plus rushes in a particular setting or a particular game. Now, that's going to do it for us today. That is my 10 must-add waiver wire targets for week 14. Can't believe we're already in week 14, man. I want to get you guys a 2024 rookie dynasty video out probably in the next couple of days, so be on the lookout for that, and then probably a sneaky starts video at the end of the week. But regardless, I love you guys. I appreciate you guys following along the entire season. I don't really want to push it as much as like if it's week 14. If you haven't checked out the Patreon already, you're probably not checking it out. But if it's like, oh man, I made it to the playoffs, like I really want to see what Ron has to say, I mean, you can go ahead. But I do have, as of right now, this video coming out, my waiver wire fab recommendation article is out. It's live on the Patreon. Where I go through like 15 plus running backs, 15 plus wide receivers, quarterbacks, tight ends, all of that. And I give you exactly how much fab I'm bidding on all of those guys, how I would rank them, a little bit of notes for each one. It's a really good way to just, essentially delegate your waiver wire to me. So you don't have to, do all the research yourself. So with all that being said, you can find that patreon.com/Ron Stewart. But if not, I just simply appreciate you watching the video, subscribing, following along this year. Just extremely grateful. So with all that being said, I'll see you guys in the next one.
Stones, like this froze, ice cold.